Welcome to this morning on Asake. Today we're talking about Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act.
Right, so our guest this morning is Ncube coming from TIZ to unpack that issue. There is we saw a communique circulating. There is a gazette circulating. People were frustrated about that. Zimbabweans are always frustrated, but don't do anything about it. So everything comes. There was the gold mafia scandal. Became frustrated for 2 days, and then episode 2, 3 drop up to 4, and then now there's this issue of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act. The government is saying procure some of the stuff away health, right? Be it medicines, be it whatever, beds or ambulances, and no one can get to question how much was spent on it. They won't even publicize or disclose to the public how much was spent on these public health issues. So it's quite sad there what's going on. So this morning I'm going to joined by our guest Ncube there from TIZ. Good morning, welcome to the show this morning.
Good morning, Brighton. Please confirm that you can hear me. I think I'm getting some fun feedback, so I'm hoping that I'm quite clear.
Yes, we can hear you, ma'am. We are clear. Let's talk about the issue of procurement processes.
All right.
Basically, we want to know more about the procurement process in Zimbabwe. How is it done and how should it be done?
Maybe there is need for us to actually define what we mean by public procurement, so that everyone can be on the same board and we can talk about something that we all understand. And when we are talking of public procurement, we are talking of the process of purchasing goods, services, or works by the public sector from the private sector. So the range of economic sectors concerned by public procurement is as wide as the needs of a government to properly function and deliver services to its citizens. So when we're talking of public procurement, we are talking of all that process and the things that go in between for the government, the public sector, for the purposes of this conversation. I think it's just the same thing, the government and the public sector, to actually purchase goods from the private sector for the benefit of the public sector. That's what we mean when we're talking about public procurement, and hence the need for us to understand the importance of the public to be part or to know this process, because this is something that actually concerns them. The money that is actually used to do that is money that is coming from the taxpayer. It's money that is coming from us. So we need to understand how that is done and that the government is actually doing it in a proper way so that people can benefit and no one is shortlisted along the way. So that is the process of public procurement that everyone needs to understand for the purposes of this discussion. So maybe just to take us through how the process maybe is done in Zimbabwe, or how we've been doing it to ensure that there's a bit of transparency and accountability. You'll note that this whole public procurement thing is actually protected or is governed by what we call the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act. So this act actually lays down procedures that the government must follow to obtain the buildings, to obtain equipment, services, and so on, that it needs to carry out its functions. So this is the act that actually governs this whole process. And generally, this act requires the government or the ministry or department which actually wants to obtain something. It can be stationary, it can be vehicles, it can be anything that you can think of that the government actually needs to function, to actually publish a notice in the gazette detailing what is wanted and inviting potential suppliers to submit bids. And then when that is done, mind you, now this is a public process, right? When everything is gazetted and all, like anyone can actually get access to this information. So once that it is done, the bids are then evaluated and then the contract is awarded to the bidder that submitted the most advantageous bid. So here we are giving an opportunity to every supplier to actually have an opportunity to bid and have this fair system that is being done, in the sense that anyone can actually supply the government. You don't have these few specific people that are actually supplying the government. So the advantageous bid is supposed to be assessed according to the price and other maybe criteria that can be laid down in the act that are actually advantageous for people in the process. So the Act also emphasizes on transparency and fairness. It also you find that also procurement also notices are published in a way that will reach as many potential bidders as possible. So when that notice is being given, you should be ensured that it's in a way that it actually reaches everyone. That even Brighton, Uslalele Country Park, you actually know that in this minute the government actually needs 100 trucks to transport this thing from this point to that point. And if you actually qualify to make a bid, you should be able to put that bid. It should not only be closed to a few people. So the bids are actually evaluated equally according to the same criteria, and all the bidders are told who has been awarded the contract. And are given an opportunity to challenge that award. Also, the Act also recognizes, however, this is the part maybe that is interesting, that is actually going to take us to the conversation that we are having today. Because you'll find that the Act actually recognizes, however, that some procurements are actually sensitive and should not be published. For example, it may be undesirable to publish the position and layout of barracks or defense works built for the defense forces. Now, mind you, are talking of the war side of things that maybe are supposed to be secret to a country that we're not all supposed to know about it, and maybe actually saying them can put us at a risk of something. So you'll find that or maybe the details of built-in security systems that are used to protect government buildings and so forth. We don't need to know that, because now we are talking of highly sensitive stuff, highly sensitive things. Hence, you'll find that Section 3, subsection 6 of the Act actually provides that the president, by notice in the Gazette, may actually declare that it will be contrary to the interests of defense, public security, or the national interests of Zimbabwe for the procurement of any construction works or class of such works to be publicly disclosed, and thereupon this act shall apply to the procurement of such works with whatever modifications that may be necessary to ensure that information concerning such works is not disclosed to the prejudice of the defense, security, or national interests of Zimbabwe. So then, this then brings us now to say this recent uh, uh, statutes that has actually been introduced, is it speaking to that? Are we saying that um, the issue construction equipment and materials and medical equipment, medicines and drugs and vehicles, including ambulances? Are we saying laboratory equipment? Are we saying chemicals and accessories? Are we saying hospital protective equipment are actually deemed as things that are of national defense security supposed to know about? So this is what actually brings us to this conversation to say, is this justifiable? Are we saying that what then section 3 subsection 6 of the Act says actually speaks into this part of because when you're talking of national defense, when you're talking of security, we then need to say, are we saying that ambulances are issues of national security? How can ambulance be possibly used as as something that can be a threat to Zimbabwe? So this is where we are saying this act has somehow been how do I put it? But this is the part of the act where then we are having maybe you say the government of Zimbabwe is actually trying to staple on whilst violating all the laid down requirements and processes of of the act. Because if you see what then that what they published under section 3 of subsection 6 of the Act, they're actually saying that the things that I just listed are actually of national interest and must not be publicly disclosed. We are talking of construction equipment and materials. We are talking of biomedical and medical equipment. We are talking of medicines and drugs. We are talking of vehicles, including ambulances. We are talking of laboratory equipment. We are talking of chemicals and accessories. We are talking of hospital protective equipment. We are talking even of repairs and maintenance services of hospital equipment and machinery. So which part of this is actually wrong? When we are looking at this, like there's actually two aspects. It's actually wrong from a legal perspective, and it's actually even more wrong from a policy perspective. Looking at it from a legal perspective, you'll see that as I've mentioned, Section 3, subsection 6 of the Act actually allows the president to protect construction works. Nothing else from that disclosure and construction work is defined in Section 2 of the Act as follows. And it doesn't say that how do they put it? Like construction work means all work associated with the construction, reconstruction, demolition, repair, or renovation of any building or infrastructure. But then you'll find that none of these things that have been listed actually fall within this definition. Construction equipment, actually, we are talking of maybe bulldozers, wheelbarrows, etc. And what else? Maybe construction materials, bricks, cement, roofing, and stuff like that. But then the other items listed in the notice have nothing whatever to do with construction. Then you also find that the notice on its own is actually in contrast to Section 3, subsection 6 of the Act, in the sense that a further point in that is that notice actually declares the listed items to be of national interest, rather than saying, as it should, that it will be contrary to the national interest of Zimbabwe for information about their procurement to be publicly disclosed. So the fact that an item is of national interest does not bring it within the ambit of Section 3, subsection 6. Then when we talk of the situation around the policy problems, from a policy point of view, the notice is actually contrary, like 100% to the spirit of the Act. The Act actually emphasizes on transparency and fairness, right? Then it's actually stated plainly, it's well articulated in Section 4, subsection 1, which actually lists the objectives of the Act. You'll find that the first objective of the Act actually states that the Act seeks to ensure that the procurement is effected in a manner that is transparent, fair, honest, cost-effective, and competitive. So this is the first objective of the Act. But then notice that has been published that is actually contradictory of what this first objective of the Act seeks to actually achieve. And then you'll find that maybe just as a recap of how this procurement system is actually came to be and so forth, you'll find that in Zimbabwe, the public procurement is actually regulated by the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Regulations Act, as I've already mentioned. But then prior to the introduction of this Public Procurement Act, you'll find that our procurement systems were actually centralized. They were vulnerable to corruption. We only had this one head of government there being like the main holder of how the procurement system actually works, actually having the discretion of taking whatever decisions that they wanted to take. This was before 2018. So the system was centralized, it was vulnerable to corruption, it was inefficient, and it was bureaucratic. Then in 2018, what happened? Is then in trying to bridge that gap and ensure that we have a transparent and very fair and corrupt-free system, then the new decentralized public procurement reform was then introduced to address all these shortcomings of the previous procurement regime by giving procurement powers to procuring entities. This is how we ended up having the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Regulations Act. This was in 2018. We are trying to bridge and actually shut down all these loopholes that we have that are actually giving way to corruption and giving way to all these things. So this was in 2018. And then what then happened is that to try and reform this public procurement in Zimbabwe, the government then discarded the then Public Procurement Act, Chapter 2 of 1999, and actually replaced it with the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Act, Chapter 22. This was actually done to align public procurement laws to Section 315 of the Zimbabwean Constitution. So you'll find how all these things are actually linked and how our very own constitution actually ensures that it speaks into the transparency of the public procurement systems. That would be Section 315 of the Zimbabwean Constitution. So this is how we ended up having this. Most of us actually will then know of what we call PRAS, which is the Procurement Regulatory board in Zimbabwe. That was then introduced to close all these gaps that were there. So now it's there. It's been there since 2018, and we've had the system that is supposed to be transparent and accountable. The bids are supposed to be done open. The people are supposed to know, because mind you, this is also our money. This is taxpayers' money. All those 14% that you're paying when you're buying groceries, those people that are being taxed, the payees and the so forth. This is the money that you're talking about.
We seem to have lost Tubelihle there, but
done in the right way. But then now we have this notice that has actually come through, and it's in complete contradiction of all these things. So what are we even saying as a country? We are putting these laws and regulations for ourselves, but then at the same time, we are failing to adhere to them. We push this, the next thing we're having this statutory instrument that is being introduced that is in total violation of that. So those are the concerns that we need to ask ourselves as citizens. Those are the issues that are actually arising from this. This is what is supposed to be, this is what everyone should be talking about. And at this point, different organizations, different players, the private sector, and everyone, because I believe each and everyone of us is actually affected in this. This is the time where we are supposed then to be sitting down, reflecting, and making sure that we take action to say, if then this is being done and we are having this total violation of what the act actually provides, what then are we supposed to do to act fast? Because I'm sure most of us are actually aware of the what did we call it? What was the popular name? The drug scandal that actually happened. The drug scandal was actually a result also of these flawed procurement procedures, and we saw loads and loads of money being lost there. We saw PPE prices being inflated, and eventually we saw the then Minister of Health, July Moore, actually being what do we call it? He was forced to resign and facing criminal charges and so forth. Though maybe the outcome of that might be a different case and whatsoever. But we saw something happening there. So it's actually said that for a country that had to go through that process, we are then going back again. That very same sector, the health sector that was affected then, we are actually putting this back at that, and we're putting these things as a private issue. What harm can people possibly bring by knowing what their money or how their money was used and well accounted for in purchasing hospital materials? So these are the issues that are actually emanating from this notice, and this notice actually just what it does is to just prevent anyone disclosing information about how the government obtains medicines, equipment, and services needed for its health institutions. So it's not just about you'll find that even the media then is actually largely affected as well, because now they can't disclose their information. It prevents them from disclosing that information because they won't have that information in the first place. So just like it happened during the COVID era, that we had the media actually bringing that scandal to light to say this is what is happening. This time they won't be able to do that because they won't even have the access to that information in the first place. So no explanation is given for imposing this veil of secrecy, but we just woke up to say this is what is happening in Zimbabwe and you guys are supposed to abide to that. This is what it is. This is how it's happening. And there's no time limit as to how long it's going to be in effect and how long it's going to be used. This new gazetted notice, it's just there. We don't know if it's a short thing or it's meant for a specific process to say maybe right now as we speak there's this process that the Ministry of Health is going through to try and maybe say they are renovating hospitals for this period, and this is only meant for that. We're not given that information. It's just there. It has no time limit and it may never be lifted. So these are all the concerns that are rising for this. Maybe for now I'll just end it here in case there are some things that are actually or reactions that are actually emanating from what I've presented so far, and also to check if people are still following. Right on.
Well, thanks so much, Tubelihle, for that presentation. Great presentation, great insight there from Tubelihle. If you're just joining us today on this morning on Asaka, talking about the Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act, and Tubelihle Ncube there from TIs was breaking down for us, giving a background and what the act involves and it's all about. But not just on there's a newspaper on I think it's on the 30th of March. 30th of March this year, the Herald reported that 193.3 million US dollar was given to the health sector to revamp the health sector, right? So they're saying 5 new 60-bed district hospitals and further 22 new health centers are going to be built using this money. Able from South African banks, totaling 103.3 million, right? As secure treasury. I'm asking myself, if now this new act comes into play to say, I'm not going to disclose who's going to be procuring, who's turning up in bed, just turning up in meat. I'm not going to disclose that those tenders. What then happens to the issue of accountability? How are we going to ask how far from the government in terms of these hospitals, in terms of this money? How are we going to seek accountability and transparency if this act now is passed and so on?
Yeah, it's quite sad, Brighton, because, you know, at the end of the day, again, remember that these things are being purchased in the name of us.
Yeah.
To say they benefit us, and then again we are not told what's happening on the ground. And thinking about the fact that imali ebolekiweyo,
Yeah.
again we are the same people that are going to pay back that money for what service, and we don't even know what is going to be bought. We can't even say, no, we need cancer machines. Why don't you rather buy cancer machines and all that? There's no engagement there. It's quite sad what's happening.
But remember, there was that issue of laptops again. The Parliament bought laptops, right? The prices were inflated. So without maybe disclosing that issue, the media cannot report, as Teresa said, or the media cannot report on that scandal. The drugs issue, the PPE scandal, without it disclosing where we're going to buy the PPEs, where we're going to buy the medicines, the media cannot report on those issues. So it's going to be a tricky one if this act now, Gazetwe, is coming into acting effective. I see you've just joined by Finance. The Finance, your hand is up. Please do go ahead to Finance with the contribution this morning.
Good morning, guys. Good morning, Brighton. Good morning. What's the other lady's name? Sorry, I always forget. Sorry, Brighton. What's the lady's name?
Tubelihle.
Oh, Tubelihle. Oh, okay, thank you so much. And thanks.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much as well for your submission this morning. This is basically travesty. We have to understand that my first point of call is the legislators. I would encourage them to come on shows like this to try and educate us, because these are the people that should be providing parliamentary oversight. But that notification, what it basically does, it does make them redundant, where they cannot have an oversight as to what the government expenditure is, the procurement on disposal, so they haven't got a say. So I would encourage people like Tendai BT, people within those parliamentary committees to come on these spaces and educate us, because it is pointless for us to read things on Twitter alone without them being articulated comprehensively so that we understand exactly where the government standing is and what it means to the general public and how our funds are being used. The second part, it is the promulgation of this notification. What it basically does, like you rightly said, that it gags all the the journalists, it does gag the bloggers, and whistleblowers alike. So if I had some information that the procurement was, overpriced, like they did with the NDS one, how do I then go to whistleblow, and where do I get the protection from? Because that's really, falls under national interest. And how would I have, acquired the information? So what it basically does, it takes away the, the accountability aspect, the transparency aspect, as you guys have mentioned, out. So it's a very ambiguous approach by the government, and we do not know the scope of it all. But when a government does away with parliamentary oversight, then there is a big problem. I think you did mention on the COVID aspect that a lot of things were done. They were overpriced and prices were inflated, and some of these contracts were given to non-people that are aligned to the government, to families within government. So it is a travesty in the Zimbabwean spectrum. I will take you back to what the government did with the Zimbabwe defense industries. Basically, they knew what they wanted to do when this whole Al Jazeera documentary came through. They had to put measures in place to gag, to stop us from, talking about it, and having these people, the journalists to report on it, to have access to information. So what they did is they gave exemption permits, which means effectively makes the Auditor General redundant because he wouldn't have direct access to that particular information because it's classified. So it is a problem for me when the government does that. The last part that I would want to probably talk about, it is the issue with, I think the other lady who spoke initially, she spoke about the alignment of the laws, was it between 2018 and 2019, in terms of procurement and disposal. The issue with that, what the government tried to do, because they had found very gross, massive loopholes in extortion of under or over invoicing. What was happening is what they call air supply, where they basically, what the suppliers were doing, they would, the government would buy some stuff from a supplier, and that particular supplier would not supply the goods, but he would invoice the government, but not supply the goods, but get paid by the government at the same time. So that was very rampant across the board. And the government discovered that that was a loophole. Things were being bought, were being procured, but not supplied, but the government would have paid. So it was called air supply. So they had to realign so that at least they would curb part of the corruption that was rampant. So basically, the government at this point in time, I think we are in for, if we allow this to continue, the notifications, which basically makes parliamentary oversight redundant. I think we're not doing justice to ourselves as a government. But my parting shot is I would encourage all legislators to come and articulate these things. We cannot continue to read things on Twitter without the proper engagement. Do not come to us for votes if you cannot engage with us to articulate things like this when the government does what it deems necessary. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Finance, for that contribution this morning. Quite sad, and I like the things that you are pointing out, to see, especially the issue of corruption. To say, we are complaining about corruption, and now we are opening another door, a bigger door to corruption with this.
But also for me, it's quite interesting. What the Second Republic, as they call it, they say it when they're coming here, they're coming to eradicate and remove corruption. We have ZAC. But now, if they can't disclose such issues of procurement, for me, it's quite sad. Also, the Act recognizes, however, that some of the procurements are sensitive and should not be published. But Tuba spoke about the issue earlier on to say ambulances. How sensitive are ambulances? How sensitive is medicine that cannot be published? So that gives a leeway now for corruption and also for looting of funds, because no one is publishing what so and so procured this on this amount, so and so is the one who got the tender. So if they can't publish those things, for me, it's quite sad. They're saying some things of national interest, however, but how is an ambulance of national interest that can publish or disclose?
And again, remember the objectives that she stated earlier on the processes and on public procurement and disposal of assets, that it's for accountability. So now the act itself doesn't then ensure accountability. It's now contradicting there, and it's
for me, I can understand the issue where they speak about the issue of barracks, right? For security reasons, for defense forces, right? If you procure guns, for example, if you procure maybe some things for the barracks, you cannot disclose that, obviously, for security issues, right? But what about an ambulance? What about construction material? What about vehicles, including ambulance, right? What about medicines? What about biomedical? Those issues need to be disclosed because it's part of the public. It's part of our taxes, our monies. I see just joined by another speaker there. Dobbs, good morning, Dobbs. Welcome to the show. Please do guide to the contributions this morning.
Many thanks a lot to Osti and other speakers. It's a bit confusing. We know that the government needed to align the law with the constitution, but in this, what they are doing, they seem to live devolution under its act, probably Devolution Act 264, to say it's not even giving power to the regions. It's just centralizing it. Then protect itself from what it's doing. In otherwise, this law is going to just protect those ones who are corrupt, as it have been happening. It means issues like buying snow graders or inflating prices, like what they do when they are constructing road, to say they will just charge about 3 times or more, and at the end of the day, those roads will be of poor standard, or the way how they did when they were buying soup costs, to say they mentioned a number to say we bought so many soup costs, but when we move around, we don't see them. Whether they did just tell us the number and pocketed the money, we don't know what happened. Now we are not going to talk about it, because I think with this issue, where they have mentioned public interest, it will make you the worst, or anybody who contribute, to say you are disclosing something, even if you have that proof to say such thing have happened, to say this is a matter of public interest. We are not supposed to disclose it, because or a matter of public interest, they might define it the way they wanted to define it. Judging by the way how our courts define their only legal issues is different to the way how we think they should be. It's just different. It just suits the government. So I think everything is covered now. We are just being told to say in issues of procurement, we have to remain silent, unless, of course, if the government itself talk about it, or any other person, or any other party involved, or those company involved disclose. Us, I think we don't have any say at the moment because of this notice. It have gauged us, and at the same time, it will encourage those who are corrupt and connected to continue looting. So we don't have anywhere to hide. Even if those ones, we do agree to say the MPs should come and discuss it and help us to discuss this. But I think this act also makes them useless, because they can't even have oversight of what is happening. Yet we all know that the issue of the parliament is for check and balances. And now who is going to check? The journalists in the fourth estate are silent. The MPs are silent. So there's nobody. We are on our own. Thanks a lot, everybody. Get your mic host.
Thank you so much, Dobbs, for your contribution this morning. Yeah, quite an observation there. I see that we also have Tutan Kabantu. Good morning, Tutan Kabantu. What's your contribution this morning?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to speak. I really feel valued contributing in this on this platform. Thank you, the previous speaker, Dobbs Maisambuko, and I really like it when I engage and when I, especially when I call you Sabuku, because when we engage with you as my Sabuku, I really appreciate that you take your political jacket off and I take my political jacket off, and I've received the most valuable insights from you. So to picking it up from where you left off, I really am I'm a little relieved to see such legislation finally coming up for two reasons. I think there's been a lot of very unhelpful discussion or a lot of division, let me call it that way, a lot of polarization brought about by certain specific topics that are of a national interest. And I think in the long, short, or to summarize my view, is that I want to think that national interests with good intent in meaning administrations should trump transparency any day, especially given our particular circumstances. And I don't say this lightly, because this action that has been taken or proposed by our government leaves our government open to two options, to two things. Either they're going to open themselves up to a lot of speculation that is going to fuel a lot of this negative talk that they are trying to avoid, in my opinion. Or number two, they will either then deliver the service to such an extent, an impressive extent, that delivery of service will quell the doubt and the negative talk. The reason I say this is because sometimes in a democracy, because we have so much ability now to express ourselves, we tend to forget that the party that won the election actually does have a mandate to enforce or to exercise their policies or to bring to fruition the policies that they campaigned on or that they believe in or what they hold in their manifesto. So that should be a starting point that, look, we at some point we have to accept that whether it's ZANU-PF or whether it's CCC or whether it's MDC or whether it doesn't really matter what party is in power at the time. The fact that they won a general election for 5 years, at least in Zimbabwe, gives them the mandate to literally pursue their own agenda for that 5 years. It is our duty at the end to then either be thankful and give them another 5 years, or to say, okay, no thanks, guys, you tried, but you know what, we've had enough of you, and we vote them out. And I hope I'm not preaching to the choir, but I just needed to state that. To ignore our current situation and to preach or to try to really hang on to transparency is really having an ostrich mentality. We cannot pretend that we are under sanctions. From the day we decided to go on our land reform program, be it rushed, be it organized, disorganized, or whatever form it took, we've been faced with sanctions. So pretending that they do not exist, to me, is folly. And then not failing to take action, legislative action that protects the best interests of the state under sanctions, given what we have gone through in the last few months with the gold mafia scandal. And remember, it didn't start there. Before that, we had other issues with, there was some expose that was about the Reserve Bank code, what was that one about the Queen Bee and something like that. And then there have been others, the Blue Ocean strategies. Where people that have had access to inside, I'll call it inside information, have taken the liberty to speculate and created these elaborate books and documents and videos and other media, and then release them out there in the public with one and single intent and purpose. It wasn't to build Zimbabwe, the state. It wasn't to bring unity. It was to sow doubt and division. And that doubt and division polarized the state. So from that perspective, I can sympathize or empathize with the government when they talk of national security. This is what the first thing that caught my mind. National security is quoted. It is probably defined elsewhere. I haven't seen the full act. I'm just speaking from what I saw.
So, I want to come through there. I see you have many speakers that want to speak. So please be brief. Round up your presentation, then I can take more speakers.
Okay, I understand. So I'm just going to finish off in less than 30 seconds. So we should not be surprised with this action for a country that is under restrictive measures, because we see this type of legislation. It's very prevalent in other states that have enjoyed the full autonomy and even exercise their own authority and power over other states. I will give you an example of the United States of America. Of all the last wars, 10 wars they've had, tenders have gone to companies, black, what's the name? I'm forgetting now. Owned or run by Dick Cheney's former vice president of the United States of America. Those tenders never go to, or rather, those jobs never go to tender. They're just awarded. The press doesn't know about it. They don't get briefed about it. It's not even discussed in the States. But it is known and it is understood that logistical, if for any efforts that are supplying war efforts, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in anywhere, any uprising to defend any embassy, they don't go to tender. They are done behind the curtain. So this is no different. And the last person, 10 seconds, I'm almost done, if you will all be patient with me. A brother mentioned, questioned how ambulances become significant to national security. Yes, ambulances are very significant because I am aware of ambulance tenders that were bought by private companies to come and supply. Actually, they were even going to function in Bulawayo. They were not even going to Harare or Mashonaland or Midlands. They were going to be functioning in Bulawayo, and they were denied a payment by the banks in the UK because the reason is that the OFAC believed that the ambulances could also be used to transfer soldiers in the event Zimbabwe then violated the reason for Zidera by going to war with Congo, for example. So you can see how ambulances and our health system can be tied and roped into this predicament we find in, where we are facing certain restrictions on certain individuals in certain business entities, including government entities in Zimbabwe. On that note, I do yield the mic.
Well, thank you so much for that contribution this morning. Tubelihle, let me come back to you, Tubelihle, around the issue of litigation. Is there room for litigation, Tubelihle? I'm a journalist. There's no access to information to journalists around this issue of procurement. There's no issue of accountability. Is there room for litigation around this SI, Tubelihle?
Well, confirm you can hear me first.
Yes, you're clear, ma'am. Please do go ahead with the contribution.
All right. So, well, on the issue of litigation, well, yes, obviously the notice can actually be challenged in court, or on the ground that is actually in contradictory with the act. But then this may be difficult for like any potential challenger to actually establish sufficient locus standi. Locus standi is actually legal grounds to bring on a challenge, because you'll find that maybe persons who have in the past supplied medical equipment to the government, and the same people can actually reasonably expect to supply it in the future, who are the very same people who can actually challenge this notice, maybe unwilling to do so for fear of prejudice on their relationship with the government. So the people who are supposed to act might also be afraid to act because of the reaction that they might get, because mind you, these are people in business and they want the deals to keep on mind. They're thinking, what if I challenge this and I'm the one who was going to get this tender, it was not going to be published and I was going to benefit from it. So it brings in that kind of sentiments around this whole thing. And then maybe in the absence of a legal challenge, because I feel like, yes, we can go that route, yes, but then a lot of challenges are going to come from that. So in the absence of that challenge, what then maybe can be done, you'll find that we can have the National Assembly, because this is their job. They can actually call on the vice president responsible for this ministry, the Minister of Health, to actually get the president to repeal this notice. So, but then the question then comes again to say, are they really willing to do this? And is it something, looking at how things have been done in the past and how other things have not been challenged, is our current sitting House of National Assembly going to actually take this thing up? Are they going to question the vice president on why this notice was necessary, or why the nation cannot be told who's supplying drugs and equipment to the country's health service and how much it is going to cost us? Is something that the National Assembly can also do. And then in the instance that the notice is not revoked again, then you would find that that's when we'll then start having maybe to rely on the Auditor General. Perhaps the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission can also look carefully at maybe the state contracts involving the hospitals and the medical supplies. But mind you, this will be a process that will then be happening after the things have already been procured, to say, okay, you did them, were they done okay, and so forth. But then it's like a late response. So yeah, there is legal remedies. Yes, it can be challenged in court on the grounds that it's actually in contradictory with the act. But then now the question is trying to I'm sure the question with every legal mind today is trying then to find the best legal ground to actually bring this up and challenge what has then been done. We're hoping that by the time we get maybe to Friday or so, we could have had some agent chamber applications being filed to actually contradict this violation of the act itself, though it's going to be quite a long one.
Thank you so much, Tubelihle, for responding to that. Yeah, looks like there's no hope there, but I see we've been joined by James of Gwanda. Good morning, James of Gwanda. What's your contribution this morning?
Good morning. I hope you can hear me, eh?
Siyakuzwa qhubeka nge-contribution yakho this morning.
Thank you so much. Senhle ngaphela uthando Brighton, because Utuba has actually explained and actually elaborated further in what will happen in our cause. But believe you me, you and me we actually will be victims, and I believe Uguti Kates going forward, we can't even account. We can't say Uguti we want to look into issues to do with journey, issues of accountability, issues of transparency. I will say kono. And imsebenzi yonke ukuthi ungazama ukuinvestigate, by the end of the day you become a victim, because umthetho usuthe lokhu la. So I think Brighton abantu abaregister ukuyavota babekwazi ukuthi ba decide that in the near future. Nyabo.
Thank you so much just for raising that contribution this morning. I see we have just been joined by another speaker, Philip Spanda. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the show. Please do go ahead with the contribution around the show.
Thank you, Brighton. Brighton, I know my request was I don't know how much is your slot, you guys, because all your programs are so important. But I see that you don't spend so much minutes with us here. I don't know how you can increase maybe by 20 minutes every day whenever you do your shows, because you leave us is still a appetite what you want to listen to more your shows. But they are Kumela Panda. Then I'll continue the next day with the same topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that. I see the bosses are here. They're listening to that plea. Yeah, they're listening to that plea. I see
Yeah.
you just joined by Zimbabwe Freedom Office. Please do go ahead to the contribution this morning.
Thank you very much, Site, for the space. Thank you for hosting it. I really appreciate you. And to all the speakers and the listeners. And yeah, I concur with what Freelance said. Thank you very much for that, Freelance. We'd like more from Site, preferably a much longer slot and maybe more slots. And if there is a radio channel, if that radio channel could be um, made available so that we can be able on our handles to post that out as well. That is just a humble request that came off the cuff. That's the first part. The second part is this Public Procurement and Disposal of Assets Act. Ladies and gentlemen, let's remember what happened when we were in the middle of COVID-19. I did a TikTok video about Mr. Obadiah Moyo. He swindled money out of the country of Zimbabwe, money which was donated. What I'm saying is a fact. And the reason why I'm able to say this, that he swindled money which was donated, it is because if he is challenging the fact that he swindled the money which was donated, I'll be very happy to face him in court. My phone number is there. This is a verified Twitter handle. I'll be very eager to face him in court, because then we will take him through the proper rigors of court. And he will face it in a country which is not Zimbabwe, sadly, because I'm in London. Now, after he did what he did, his own company was then fingered in a scandal where his company was producing fake COVID-19 certificates. Fake COVID-19 certificates. What I'm saying is a fact. Even Nick Mangwana was tweeting about the company owned by Obadiah Moyo. Now, what then happened was the health ministry was taken over by the then vice president of Zimbabwe, who had only just returned from China after receiving treatment. And then he was both vice president and minister of health at the same time. And then he put in place military regimental style management of the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, during the same time period, videos were going around where I'm not going to say I'm going to say we were seeing Zimbabweans dying on our mobile phone screens, taking their last breath on our mobile phone screens outside of hospitals because money was stolen. There was no accountability, none whatsoever. There was no morality, none. There was no scruples at all. Total and utter contempt of the whole of the country of Zimbabwe. Security infrastructure totally rotten to the core. When it came to being able to find out before this whole thing happened and being able to stop it. Because what it led to was people dying. People dying. Healthcare workers died on the front line in Zimbabwe. Zimbabweans were phoning anybody and everybody because it hit the UK before it hit Zimbabwe. It hit America before it hit Zimbabwe. It hit the whole Europe before it hit Zimbabwe. So diasporans were warning everybody who was in their family chat groups. This is true. This is a fact. No one can deny this. To say, hey, take this COVID thing serious. You can die. You can die. When it hit Zimbabwe, the people who were complaining were the funeral directors. They were saying there's too many people dying. Take this COVID thing seriously. In a healthcare system where there were no checks and balances. In a healthcare system where there was no accountability. Right. What does this mean? This means somebody can decide to charge not $20 for a mask, like what the crooks were charging. For a mask which you can pay 64 cents. 64 cents. In the UK, you can buy a box of masks now for less than £20. £20 sterling. £20. You buy a box of 100 masks. A box of gloves, you pay less than £10 when you go to a high street. If you go to buy wholesale, you pay less than £10 for a box of masks, and you pay less than £5 for a box of gloves. In Zimbabwe, one glove was being sold for £1. £1 for one glove during a health emergency where you are trying to save lives. Or from a political party that says they went to war for our freedom. And they failed. They failed totally to prevent the deaths of Zimbabweans during COVID-19. Up and down across the nation, all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is legalizing what Obadiah Moore did. This is legalizing any kind of money laundering scheme, any kind of looting, where there'll be no chance, no way that if anyone asks him to Ngube, what did you spend that money on, or how much did health ministry receive, or how much did you spend on to build that hospital? You say, I don't have to tell you that. That's not public information. How much did you spend to buy that syringe? That's not public information. How much did you spend to buy that ambulance? That's not public information.